We often hear about the awakening of consciousness, a spiritual shift, a new awareness, or an elevated understanding of life. For many, it's described as a journey into light, peace, and fulfillment. But rarely do we talk about the other side of that path, the one that's shadowed, complex, and deeply uncomfortable. Awakening is not just an ascent into higher awareness. It is also a descent into the self, and sometimes that journey leads through the darkest parts of our inner world. There is a common idea, often romanticized, that spiritual awakening is a sudden shift that fixes everything, a magical state where all suffering disappears and peace becomes permanent. It sounds wonderful, but it's a misconception. Awakening does not eliminate pain. It changes your relationship with it. Rather than a moment of escape, real awakening invites us to see life with greater clarity, including its discomforts. It's less about removing suffering and more about learning how to be fully present with it. This realization can be the first major shock for many on the spiritual path. What unfolds is not always the expected joy, but a process that demands internal confrontation of fears, of old beliefs, and most importantly, of the self we've carefully constructed. When we awaken, we begin to recognize the ego, our constructed sense of identity. It is the voice in our mind that says, "I am this," or "I must become that." It clings to ideas of self-importance and superiority. But awakening doesn't reinforce the ego. It exposes it. Instead of making us feel special or more evolved than others, it reminds us that we are part of a much larger whole. We're not separate from the world. We are woven into it. This is where many people struggle. They expect spiritual growth to enhance their identity, but real growth often requires shedding that identity altogether. The ego resists this change because letting go feels like death to it. Spiritual pride is another subtle trap. It happens when the ego hijacks the spiritual journey and turns it into a status symbol. Statements like, "I'm more enlightened than others," or "I vibrate on a higher frequency," are signs of this illusion. This mindset creates division instead of unity. It replaces compassion with comparison. True spirituality is grounded in humility. It recognizes that growth is not a competition and that everyone is walking their own unique path. One of the most challenging aspects of awakening is confronting the shadow self, the hidden parts of our psyche that we deny, suppress, or avoid. These include emotions like jealousy, fear, resentment, or anger. They don't vanish with meditation or positive thinking. They remain buried and active beneath the surface, influencing our behavior. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist, called this the shadow. He believed that integrating the shadow is key to real self-awareness. We often meet our shadow through relationships. Someone triggers us, and we blame them. But in truth, they may be reflecting something unresolved within ourselves. This is called projection. We unconsciously project repressed traits onto others. The people who annoy, challenge, or even attract us strongly often mirror our own unacknowledged parts. Avoiding our darker sides only strengthens them. But when we recognize and accept these parts, they begin to lose their unconscious control. For example, anger isn't just a flaw. It might reveal boundaries being crossed. Fear isn't weakness. It shows us where courage is needed. Shadow work is not about justifying bad behavior. It's about understanding our full humanity. Only by facing the shadow can we access the energy we've used to keep it buried. What we resist persists. What we accept transforms. This principle is essential to real healing. Even during deep self-work, the ego doesn't simply disappear. It evolves, adapts, and can even disguise itself in spiritual language. It may say, "Look how awakened I am." Others just don't get it. This creates what Chogyam Trungpa called spiritual materialism, the ego wearing a mask of enlightenment. Instead of dissolving, it builds a new identity based on being spiritual, wise, or awakened. To avoid this, we must practice constant self-reflection. Ask, why am I sharing this insight? Am I trying to serve or to impress? Am I truly present or performing a role? True awakening brings us closer to others, not further apart. It dissolves the illusion of being better, more evolved, or separate. The deeper we go within, the more we realize that every person we meet is also navigating their own complexity. Humility doesn't mean denying our growth. It means understanding that no matter how much we evolve, there's always more to learn. Contrary to popular belief, awakening isn't always light-filled or joyful. At a certain point, many people enter a phase of deep emotional and spiritual confusion known as the dark night of the soul. This is not depression, though it can feel similar. It's a period of internal collapse where the beliefs, identities, and structures that once brought comfort suddenly lose meaning. You may feel disconnected, lost, or spiritually numb. But this darkness is not a punishment. It's a sacred process. Saint John of the Cross, the 16th century mystic who coined the phrase, described it as the soul's journey through emptiness, leading toward divine union. In simpler terms, it's the breaking down of the false self, the ego, so that the true self can emerge. The dark night often follows intense periods of spiritual growth. Once illusions are stripped away, the mind and heart are left raw. You no longer resonate with the old version of life, but the new understanding hasn't fully taken form yet. This in-between state can feel unbearable, but it's where real transformation happens. As Paulo Coelho writes in The Alchemist, the darkest hour of the night comes just before the dawn. This process removes what's no longer aligned with your soul. It's a clearing, a preparation for deeper authenticity, greater compassion, and a more grounded spirituality. Resisting this phase only prolongs it. We often ask, why is this happening to me? Or, what did I do wrong? But the truth is, you're not broken. You're being rebuilt. Carl Jung famously said, what you resist persists, but what you accept transforms. During the dark night, acceptance is your greatest ally. Accept the emptiness, accept the confusion. Allow yourself to feel lost, because those emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent states, and in that acceptance, a shift begins. Eventually, clarity returns. It doesn't arrive as a sudden epiphany, but as a quiet realization. You've changed. You carry your experiences differently now. The same situations don't trigger you the way they used to. Your need for control softens. You become more rooted, more compassionate, and more present. The pain you went through wasn't in vain. It became the soil for your growth. This is the gift of the dark night. It clears the noise so that you can hear the voice of your true self. Even after the dark night, one trap still remains, the spiritual ego. It's the part of the mind that turns awakening into an identity. It says, I've healed more than others. I've transcended human problems. But in reality, true awakening is not about being above anything. It's about being fully with everything. Spiritual pride can make us judgmental of others, critical of different paths, or emotionally disconnected. Instead of serving others with love, we subtly begin to separate from them. What we resist persists. What we accept transforms. This principle is essential to real healing. This is why humility is not optional. It's essential. True spirituality isn't proven by how much you meditate or how much you know. It's reflected in how you treat people. Can you be kind when it's hard? Can you listen when it's inconvenient? Can you meet others where they are without needing to fix or correct them? When we shift the focus from self to service, the spiritual path becomes richer. No one is ahead. No one is behind. We're all walking together in different ways toward the same truth. The goal of awakening is not perfection, it's integration. The light is not better than the shadow. Both are part of the same whole. Your fear, your anger, your doubt, these are not failures. They are invitations to deeper understanding. When you hold space for all of yourself without judgment, you step into true wholeness. As Jung put it, I'd rather be whole than good. Awakening is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong unfolding. With each insight comes a new layer to explore. With each challenge, a new chance to grow. You may revisit old patterns. You may forget what you've learned. And that's okay. The path is not linear, it spirals. What matters is your willingness to stay present, to keep returning to your center, to keep opening your heart even when it hurts. In the end, the journey is not about reaching enlightenment. It's about becoming fully human, aware, open, and alive. If you're in the middle of a difficult phase, wondering if you're lost or doing something wrong, know this: you are exactly where you need to be. The discomfort, the confusion, the silence, it's all part of your expansion. You are not breaking down. Thank you for walking this path with awareness. May your journey continue with clarity, courage, and compassion for yourself and for others. And remember, awakening isn't about finding something new. It's about remembering what you've always been.